Good morning and welcome to the Core Connection. I'm Mira Rubin here with you on Enlightened World Network. And today's topic is perspectives and truth. And often we have one vantage point on an issue or an experience, and that we tend to believe that that's the truth when in fact there are multiple angles from which to be able to view something to get a more holistic impression. So we're going to talk about that. But good morning, Rosalind. Welcome. So good to be with you this morning. And welcome to everybody else who's joining us. Before we get started talking about perspectives and truth, let's take a couple minutes to get present. So let's take a deep breath in through your nose and hold it. And imagine clean, crisp oxygen flooding your lungs, flowing into your bloodstream, nourishing all your cells, all your organs, bringing vital life energy to your body and being. And as you exhale any tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's take another deep breath in through your nose and hold it. This time, imagine brilliant, bright light lighting you up from the inside out, illuminating, electrifying, and energizing all your cells, all your molecules, all your electrons, creating a brilliant beam of light and energy from your heart out into the world. And as you exhale any remaining tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's press our palms together, vigorously rub your hands together to feel the friction, the temperature, the pressure, the motion, the tickling and tingling when you stop, and allow all those sensations to bring you present right here, right now, into this remarkable physical form that enables us to experience life. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Good morning, Gia. Wow, it's so great to have you joining us. It's been a while. So we are talking about perspectives and truth. And we all have our opinions about things. That's a given. And I think that most of us want to be finding the truth, whatever the truth is. Really what we have access to is truth with the lowercase t, probably. But the more perspectives we're able to maintain or entertain, maybe the closer we can get to what the capital T truth might be. So let's just use an example. You may have heard the story of the blind man and the elephant. And the man who was at the elephant's tail was feeling the long hairs and experiencing the elephant as represented by these long hairs. Someone else was touching the rough skin of the elephant and making a determination based on that. Another person, the trunk of the elephant, and making a determination on that. And for each of these people, the experience that they experienced was true and real, but it was incomplete. And that's where perspectives come in. If we look at a shadow on the wall, what we're seeing is a representation, a very limited representation of whatever it was that was casting the shadow. And in so many cases, the way that we make determinations about the way the world works, or who other people are, or how the dynamics of a situation are intertwined is very much like looking at the shadow or just noticing one portion of the elephant. And we interact with these impressions as though they are the truth. And we get committed to our vantage point. We get committed to our perspective and to our opinion, and we become identified with these often very limited awarenesses. And we're conditioned in many ways to do that, to create our stance. And we make judgments of other people and other circumstances with this very limited amount of data, essentially, this very limited amount of information. And then we act as if those determinations are true. And we can see this in our biases against other people. We can see this in our interpretations of dynamics in politics. We become very polarized. And I think it's useful for all of us, given that these times are so fractious in so many ways, where there's so much polarization, that we look at how we might be able to move from this place to the next place. So the thing about perspectives is that as we expand our perspective, as we have a broader view, as we have multiple angles from which to view something, we have an ability to see the greater whole. And not only do we have the ability to see the greater whole, but when we move into a different perspective, all different options are available to us that might not have been perceptible from another vantage point. So if we move into, for instance, from the place of separation and competition and opposition and scarcity, that is sort of the dominant paradigm in which we exist. From that perspective, things like war make sense, right? Things like you having more means I'm having less might make sense. Me having to protect what's mine from you trying to take it, maybe that makes sense from a paradigm of scarcity. But if we move into a paradigm of connectedness, all of a sudden, war becomes like cutting off my own arm or selling parts of my body, damaging myself. If I damage you, I'm damaging myself. A whole different set of options, a whole different set of interpretations show up. So what wasn't even perceptible from this place of scarcity all of a sudden opens into potentials for cooperation and collaboration and sharing and communion and connection. And maybe negotiation doesn't become a win-lose kind of situation or a lose-lose situation, but it's looking at how can I how can I/we collectively create a circumstance that is nurturing to all? It's a very, very different perspective. And from that perspective, different options are then available. Different potentials, different possibilities are available and perceivable that wouldn't have otherwise been in any way available or accessible to us. So if, for example, I'm angry, I'm going to perceive things through that lens, and it's going to I'm going to respond with anger. And I'm likely going to perpetrate reasons for people to be angry with me. Whereas if I'm coming from a place of connection or a place of joy or a place of love, it's likely that I will engender that in response. And it's very clear that the perspective that we bring to something determines our experience, determines the possibilities. So if someone interacts with me with anger and I'm coming from a place of love, I might be able to respond to them in a playful way or in a joyful way or a compassionate way, rather than responding to them with anger as well. The perspective, the place that we come from, the lens through which we view the world dictates the possibilities that we are able to recognize. I don't know if it's true, maybe it's common lore, but I remember hearing a story of the, I guess, Spanish ships coming to the United States, what is now the United States, and the indigenous people not being able to see the ships because it was something so foreign they couldn't recognize it. They didn't have a frame of reference to be able to interpret what was there. And likewise, again, I don't know if this is true or not, but stories of the Eskimos having a multitude of words for snow, variations on snow, that most of us who are not living in that kind of environment where snow is a prevalent factor don't have those distinctions. We don't perceive those distinctions. And maybe even with nuances of color, for instance, until those nuances of color are defined, we may not perceive them. So we can train ourselves into a broader perception. And we can train ourselves into a broader perception of being as well. We can train ourselves into awareness by practicing. So years and years ago, I was trained in NLP, neuro-linguistic programming. And one of the skills that one develops in that training is to be able to perceive minimal cues. So for example, to become aware of whether someone's irises are dilated or constricted, whether there's tension, someone's holding tension, for instance, in their jaw, or if there's a slight change in demeanor that is indicated by the way that someone's holding their eyes or their breath, whether they're breathing up in their chest or in their belly, whether they're speaking really fast or slow, to be listening and watching for all these minimal cues that are indicators. So it's possible to get trained into greater awareness. And when you have that greater awareness, the more information you have, the more you're able to see the whole picture. We've all seen diagrams, for instance, of a cube that if you flatten it, looking at that diagram, it looks like a hexagon. And yet that's one vantage point. We can turn it around and it looks like a square. And we can turn it around and, it has different appearances. And it is by recognizing that there are these multiple perspectives that we are getting bits of information that we need to compile to be able to make a greater whole. And oftentimes we see something and we say, it's this, and then we dispense with it and move on to the next thing, whether it's a person or an idea or an object. We identify it and we move on. But in fact, we might just be seeing the tail of the elephant and not recognizing that there is a greater whole there. It's maybe an intellectual laziness in a way, or a need to feel like we understand things. And we tend to go with the simplest perspective or the simplest view, and then dispense with something, or rail against it, or try to change it from that one perspective when we don't even know what the thing is. And we could be considering that entertaining these other perspectives is a way that we can engage more fully with and maybe approach more directly this notion of what's real or what's true, that entertaining these other perspectives or incorporating these multiple perspectives gives us greater access to a whole and to different options, to different choices than might be available with just one view. A richer understanding, a richer capacity for generative, creative thought and experience. So when we are looking at ways to create the world that we would like to live into, maybe what we get to do is to be turning the question in our minds, looking from all different perspectives, trying to find a new way to see what is so familiar that we are constrained by our prejudices, by our judgments, by our entrenched way of thinking. We need to find ways to break out of those patterns to be able to generate something unbounded by that encompassing paradigm. So again, the paradigm that we're entrained to is one of scarcity and separation and domination and control and hierarchy and power, expressed through domination and control. And what does it take to imagine a new way of being? Because we're so bound by that paradigm. It's pervasive, and the violence of it is pervasive. You know, I was talking earlier about war, how in this domination, control, scarcity mentality, war makes sense. But if we recognize that we're all connected, you know, what also makes sense in this domination control paradigm is extractive technologies and pulling resources from the earth and rampant consumerism and unchecked consumption. That all makes sense in its way with this domination and control idea and amassing wealth and the rampant craziness of our expansion, you know, more. All of that makes sense. And if we step into a perspective of we're all connected, the planet and nature is part of us. We are nature. We are one with this bigger organism. Does it doesn't make sense anymore. It's like cutting off our own arms or our own heads to be proceeding in the way that we do. Different options would become available. Collaboration would become available instead of maybe this confrontation, if we come from a different recognition. The thing is that we can't get there from here. It's not a linear movement. There's no way within the paradigm of domination and control that we can get to this place of peacefulness. It doesn't allow for that. Its foundation is based on separation. So the question is, how do we move from this one dominant paradigm into another way of being? How do we collectively move into that new space, that new way of being? And perhaps it's one heart and mind and soul at a time. You know, perhaps it's each of us in our individual awakening and speaking it and trying to find ways to live it. Maybe that is going to support us collectively toward moving in that direction that can sustain us and other life on the planet. Perhaps it's our own explorations individually and collectively in our circles, little pockets growing perhaps, that can allow us to be cultivating a new sensibility and new possibilities, moving into this space of greater collective awareness. I'm wondering, is it something that we can bring into our consciousness, that we can cultivate our own experience of with those in vicinity, those close to us? Can we start expanding into that? Can we be entertaining those questions? And maybe in entertaining those questions, we might be opening up new possibilities, new areas of conversation, new areas of experience. It can feel crazy making, because there's not the social support. In so many ways, there's not the social support for that kind of thinking and that kind of being. So it's kind of like living in two worlds at once, trying to straddle these very different universes. And yet I think it takes the courage to straddle that, to be moving in that direction, to be able to start that transition. We need to be able to recognize the limits of our current paradigm, to be willing to sort of step into the unknown. And it looks crazy from the separation, control, fear-based paradigm. It seems really crazy to be embracing one another and finding ways to collectively care for one another. They're diametrically opposed kinds of perspectives. So to straddle those two worlds is a challenge, but I invite us all to step into that courageously, arm in arm, and let's see what we can cultivate. Let's see if we can raise the energy, strengthen the momentum of movement in that direction. Again, it's not a linear process. So that's today's invitation, and tomorrow's and the next days, that we all look to broaden our perspective, to take different vantage points, to seek understanding. And yeah, that's it for today. Perspectives and truth. I'm Mira Rubin. This is the Core Connection, and I go live here each weekday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern on the Enlightened World Network Facebook page and YouTube channel. And I invite you to follow me and Enlightened World Network. The links are in the description. Thank you so much for being with us this morning. And as always, I'm so grateful for the opportunity to have these conversations together and to share these musings about what it is to be human, and what it is to actually create the world that we desire so deeply in our hearts. So until next time, so much love to you.